On the dusty training field, Lieutenant Colonel Thorne hissed through his teeth. His venom meant only for me. "Your career is over, Vaughn. The Army doesn't need a distracted single mother playing soldier. Go home and take care of your kid." He didn't just fire me. He used my son, my reason for living, as the bullet. But he made a fatal mistake. He forgot that nothing is more dangerous than a mother with nothing left to lose. My name is Captain Lexi Vaughn. I'm 36 years old. And on that Thursday afternoon, under the relentless, bleaching heat of the Los Angeles sun, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. A pure, uncomplicated sense of pride. The air at Howard Jones Field, USC's iconic training ground, was thick with the smell of dry heat and freshly cut grass, a scent I'd come to associate with progress. This was my world, my real world. This was where I belonged, a place where the currency was competence and dedication, where I was respected not for who I was, but for what I knew and what I could teach. In my peripheral vision, I watched my cadets. They moved with a newfound confidence, a fluidity that hadn't existed 6 months ago, when they were just a collection of nervous, eager faces. Now they were a unit. They communicated with hand signals, anticipated each other's movements, and operated with a precision that made my heart swell. They were becoming leaders, my leaders. I allowed myself a small internal smile, already composing the story I'd tell my 10-year-old son, Jackson, tonight. He loved hearing about his mom's future soldiers. They were our ritual, a bridge between my two worlds, a way for him to understand the part of me that wore a uniform, the part that found fulfillment in service. That pride, however, was a fragile, beautiful thing. A soap bubble shimmering in the harsh sunlight, and it was about to be shattered. I heard the deliberate crunch of combat boots on the dry earth behind me. It was a sound I knew well, a rhythm of authority, but this time it carried a different weight, a predatory weight. I turned, my body already tensing. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne and his ever-present shadow, Captain Evans, were approaching. Thorne's posture was rigid, his jaw set. He didn't beckon me to the privacy of his office, a courtesy afforded even for minor infractions. No, this was a performance. He motioned me to a corner of the field, just far enough that the cadets couldn't hear the words, but close enough for them to see the confrontation, to see their instructor being singled out by the battalion commander. It was a calculated move, designed for maximum public humiliation. My training, 12 years of it, kicked in. My spine straightened. My face became a neutral mask, an impassive fortress I had built to survive in a world of men. "Captain Vaughn," Thorne began. His voice was flat, cold, the kind of sterile tone a surgeon might use before an amputation. Then it dropped to a venomous hiss, a sound meant only for me, a poison dart aimed at the very core of my identity. "I've been reviewing your contributions. It seems the burden of being a single mother may be affecting your focus." The world stopped. The buzzing of the cicadas in the nearby trees, the distant drone of LA traffic on the 110 freeway, my own breath, it all just ceased. He had called my son, my light, my reason for everything, a burden. The word echoed in the sudden roaring silence of my mind, a physical blow. He wasn't finished. The blade had to be twisted. "The Army requires 100% commitment, Captain. Not someone whose mind is divided. Your career here is over." The words hung in the hot, still air, seemingly visible, like heat haze. He held out a manila folder, an innocuous object that now felt as heavy as a tombstone. My hand, a hand trained to be steady under fire, had the slightest tremor as I took it. My fingers brushed his, and I flinched internally at the cold contact. I didn't need to open it. My eyes were seared by the bold red stamp on the cover sheet of my officer evaluation report, my OER. 2 words that were a death sentence for any officer with ambition: relief for cause. My throat tightened, a knot of concrete and shattered glass. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My eyes, against my will, flickered past Thorne to Captain Evans, who stood just behind his shoulder, pretending to study the horizon. And I saw it. It wasn't a normal smile. It was a smirk. A greasy, self-satisfied smirk of a lesser man watching a rival he could never beat in a fair fight finally get taken down. It was the smirk of someone who knew this was coming, who had likely added his own poison to the pot, who was now savoring my public humiliation. That single expression told me everything. This wasn't professional. This was a petty, vicious purge. The insult from Thorne was the blade, but the smirk from Evans was the salt being ground deep into the wound. I don't remember walking off the field. I don't remember the drive home. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my old Jeep Wrangler in the driveway of my small Culver City apartment, the engine off. The California sun baked the interior of the car, making the air thick and hard to breathe. My hands were clenched so tightly on the steering wheel, my knuckles were white and aching. The folder lay on the passenger seat, a toxic presence, a stain on my life. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep, the wound too fresh for tears. There was only a cold, hollow space where my pride used to be, a crater left by an explosion. The 2 images replayed in my mind, a torturous, unending loop: Thorne's cruel, dismissive words and Evans's triumphant, ugly smirk. How did it come to this? What did I do wrong other than my best? Or was that my mistake all along? Sitting in my Jeep, the ghost of Evans's smirk still burning in my mind, my thoughts drifted back. How did it come to this? The answer wasn't in that single brutal moment on the field. It was written in the history of the last 2 years, a history that began with so much hope. I remember my first day at USC's ROTC battalion like it was yesterday. The unit, the Vanguard Battalion, was coasting. Their scores at the National Advanced Camp in Fort Knox were mediocre. Their morale was flat. They had potential, but they lacked a spark. I saw my mission clearly: to build, to inspire, to forge leaders. My small Culver City apartment became my command center. Many nights, long after Jackson was asleep, I'd be surrounded by topographical maps and training manuals, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face. It was there I created The Forge. It was more than just a training program, it was my philosophy. A grueling weekend-long field exercise that pushed the cadets to their absolute limits, mentally and physically, simulating the relentless pressure of real-world operations. I didn't just teach them tactics, I taught them grit. I poured my heart into it. I remember using my own money to buy better compasses and night vision gear, because the standard issue equipment was outdated. After every exhausting Saturday at the Forge, I'd drive back to my apartment and spend hours cooking a massive pot of my 5-bean chili. It was my way of showing them that a leader takes care of their soldiers, that community is built not just in the field, but around a shared meal. Seeing their tired but satisfied faces as they devoured that chili was a better reward than any medal. I wasn't just their instructor. I felt like their mentor, their big sister, sometimes even their den mother. And it worked. In 2 years, the Vanguard Battalion went from the middle of the pack to the top 5% in the nation. We were producing distinguished military graduates at triple the previous rate. I was so proud. And then Lieutenant Colonel Thorne arrived. He came from the East Coast, from a family of decorated officers, and he carried that pedigree like a shield. He saw the numbers, the prestige I had built, and he didn't see a success to celebrate. He saw an asset to acquire. He recognized the value of the forge immediately. His first move was subtle, political. He didn't shut it down, he rebranded it. In a battalion-wide meeting, he announced a new enhanced program called Thorne's Crucible. My program, my name, my work, erased with a single PowerPoint slide. He would then hold private mentorship sessions with my top cadets, the ones I had personally nurtured. He'd sit them down in his polished office and speak of his vision for the battalion, subtly planting the seed that he was the grand architect, and I was merely a functionary, a cog in his machine. The air in the battalion changed. The open camaraderie was replaced by a quiet, watchful tension. He was a master of corporate warfare dressed in an army uniform. He would praise me in public. Captain Vaughn is a tremendous asset, while burying my reports and recommendations in bureaucratic red tape. The culmination of his theft, the moment that truly hollowed me out, came during the 8th Brigade's annual military ball. It was a grand affair at a glittering hotel in Marina del Rey. A night of dress uniforms and polished speeches. And it was the night Thorne was scheduled to receive the Leader of the Year award, an award secured entirely by the performance metrics that I and my cadets had achieved. I wasn't there to see it. I was assigned battalion duty officer that night. A pointless, demeaning task for a senior captain, essentially babysitting an empty building. I sat alone in the sterile office, the only sound the hum of the fluorescent lights and the crackle of a sports game on a small radio. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a loyal sergeant who was at the event. It read, "LTC Thorne just gave his acceptance speech, ma'am. Talked all about the success of Thorne's Crucible. They gave him a standing ovation. He didn't mention your name." I read the message 3 times. A standing ovation for my work, for my late nights, for my chili. I didn't cry. The feeling was something colder, emptier. It was the quiet, sickening realization that in some battles you can do everything right and still lose. I just stared out the window at the empty parking lot, feeling invisible, like my very existence had been written out of my own story. You know that feeling, don't you? The sting of having your hard work, your passion, your very soul poured into something, only to watch someone else step into the spotlight and take the credit. That gut-wrenching moment when you realize your contribution has been completely erased. If you've ever felt that profound injustice, that feeling of being a ghost at your own victory parade, let me know in the comments with a broken heart emoji. So we, who understand this specific ache, can see that we are not alone. It wasn't just that he stole my work, it was how easily he did it. How could a man like that, a man built on lies, climb so high in an institution supposedly built on honor? That question would haunt me, and it would lead me down a path I never expected to take. After the military ball fiasco, a sliver of defiant hope remained in me. It was a foolish hope, I see that now, but it was all I had. The annual Ranger Challenge competition was approaching. This wasn't about reports or speeches. This was about grit, sweat, and performance. It was pure. It was a competition so demanding that politics and favoritism were supposed to burn away, leaving only the most capable teams standing. This, I thought, was my arena, my last stand. In a move of cunning manipulation, Thorn gave me full authority to select and train the team. "Show me what you've got, Vaughn," he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Despite my deep-seated suspicion, I poured everything I had into it. I selected the best of the best, a team of 10 cadets who were strong, smart, and hungry. Among them was Cadet Miller. He wasn't the most naturally gifted, but he had heart. I'd spent extra hours tutoring him in land navigation, helping him pass a critical academic exam he was close to failing. I saw his potential, and I believed in him. I believed in all of them. For 6 weeks, we trained relentlessly. Early mornings, late nights, we ran the hills, around the Rose Bowl until our lungs burned, practiced constructing a one-rope bridge in the dark, and drilled emergency medical procedures until they were pure muscle memory. We became a family, bound by shared exhaustion and a common goal. I saw the trust in their eyes, and I gave them mine in return. The day of the competition was hot and tense. We were performing well, neck and neck with the team from UCLA. The final event, the one that would decide everything, was the one-rope bridge. It's a high-stakes, high-pressure test of teamwork and precision. One person's mistake could jeopardize the entire team. I had drilled this with them hundreds of times. They knew it cold. They started across the ravine. The movements were clean, efficient. I felt that familiar swell of pride. And then I saw it. Miller, halfway across the rope, suddenly and awkwardly lost his footing. It wasn't a genuine slip. His movements were exaggerated, theatrical. He flailed, causing the rope to shake violently, and his teammate behind him nearly lost her grip. It was a manufactured disaster. My blood ran cold. It's a setup. Instantly, as if on cue, Thorn and Evans appeared at the edge of the course. They had been waiting. They always seemed to be waiting. Thorn didn't hesitate. He blew a whistle, halting the entire competition. He strode over to our team, his face a mask of feigned outrage. "Enough, this is a safety catastrophe," he boomed, his voice carrying across the entire event site. He gathered all the watching cadets, a captive audience for his show. He turned on me, his eyes glinting with malicious triumph. "Captain Vaughn, your negligence is appalling. You push these cadets with no regard for their safety. I am officially relieving you of your duties for this event." The public humiliation was a physical blow. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. But the worst was yet to come. Thorn turned to Miller, who was now safely on the ground, nursing a non-existent injury. He placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice dripping with false concern. "Cadet, tell me the truth. Did Captain Vaughn fail to provide you all with adequate safety instruction for this obstacle?" This was the moment of truth. I held my breath, my eyes locked on Miller. I had saved his academic career. I had believed in him. He looked up, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a silent, agonizing eternity. Then he broke. "Sir," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. "Lieutenant Colonel, sir, maybe. Maybe we weren't as prepared as we should have been." A lie, a cowardly, gutless lie, and in its wake, a devastating silence. The silence of the other 9 team members who knew the truth, who had trained with me, who had sweated and bled alongside me. They stood there, heads down, staring at the dirt. Their silence was louder than Miller's lie. It was the sound of loyalty dying. It was the sound of fear winning. In that moment, I wasn't just being attacked by my commander. I was being abandoned by my own soldiers. The pain of that betrayal was 1,000 times worse than Thorn's venom. It was absolute. I stood there, stripped of my command, my honor, and my team, as the world spun around me. The illusion I had clung to, that merit and hard work would ultimately prevail, was gone, incinerated in the fire of one boy's weakness and another man's ambition. That night, back in my silent apartment, there was no more shock. There was no more confusion. There was only a cold, hard clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a war, and I had been a fool for not realizing it sooner. I sat down at my laptop, my fingers moving with a new, chilling purpose. I created a new folder on an encrypted external hard drive. I named it Contingency, and I began to type, documenting the date, the time, and every single detail of the day my world was set on fire. The fight was just beginning. The night after the Ranger Challenge disaster was the lowest point I had ever reached. The white-hot anger from the day had cooled, leaving behind a cold, heavy ash of despair that settled deep in my bones. I sat in the dark of my living room, the blinds drawn against the artificial glow of Los Angeles. The only light came from my laptop screen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the still air. In the next room, my son Jackson was asleep, his soft, even breathing a steady rhythm in the oppressive silence. For him, I had to be strong, but for the first time in my 12-year career, I felt my strength utterly failing me. The Army was my life, my identity. It was the institution that had taken a girl from Ohio and forged her into a leader. But now it was spitting me out, rejecting me like a foreign body. I opened my browser and typed Project Manager Los Angeles into the search bar on Indeed.com. I scrolled through endless job listings for tech companies in Silicon Beach, for logistics firms in the Port of Long Beach. Each job description felt alien, written in a corporate language I didn't speak. Synergize cross-functional teams, leverage scalable assets. A profound sense of failure washed over me. I wasn't just losing a job, I was facing the terrifying prospect of losing myself. The contingency file I had so defiantly created on my hard drive now felt less like a weapon and more like a final, desperate message in a bottle, a testament to a battle already lost. Just as I was about to click on a listing for a mid-level logistics coordinator, a job that felt like a gray, colorless surrender, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It lit up with an unfamiliar number. The area code was 502, Kentucky. My first instinct was to ignore it. A wrong number, a telemarketer, anything but something I had the energy to deal with. But something, some flicker of exhausted curiosity, made me reach for it. I answered, my voice a tired rasp I barely recognized. Vaughn. Lexi, it's Izzy. Thank God you answered. Isabella Flores. My best friend from officer candidate school, a spitfire of a woman, with a laugh that could fill a room and a loyalty as solid as granite. She had wisely transferred out of the Vanguard Battalion a year ago, sensing the toxic shift in command before I was willing to see it. We hadn't spoken in months, lost in the whirlwind of our separate military lives. Izzy, what's going on? I sat up straight, a jolt of adrenaline cutting through the fog of my despair. Her voice was an anchor to a time when things were simpler. I've been trying to reach you, she said, her voice urgent, fast-paced. Listen to me, Lexi. Don't do anything stupid. Don't resign. Don't let them win. It's a little late for that, Izzy, I said, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping my lips. I think they've already won. No, she said, her voice firm, resolute. They haven't. Listen, I'm working at Fort Knox now. I'm on the staff of Brigadier General Alan Pierce. He's the deputy commander of USACC. My heart skipped a beat. A general officer, a name I knew only from official memos. Izzy continued, the words tumbling out, a lifeline thrown across 1,000 miles. Your name, Captain Lexi Vaughn, has come up. Not in a bad way, in a very good way. The general has been reviewing performance metrics from all the major university programs. He's obsessed with data, and USC's data, specifically for the 2 years before Thorne took over, stood out like a beacon. The graduation rates, the number of distinguished military graduates, the physical fitness scores, it was all top tier. He kept asking, who was the senior military instructor during this period? Find me that officer. Izzy's voice was filled with a triumphant pride on my behalf. He's heard whispers about Thorne, you know, that his reports are a little too polished. The general trusts numbers, not narratives. She paused, letting it sink in. He wants to start a new pilot program, she said, her excitement palpable. The Future Leader Development Program, a whole new way to train our best and brightest, and he's looking for the right person to lead it. He specifically asked about you, Lexi. He doesn't know Thorne from a hole in the wall. He just knows your results. My results. The work I had poured my soul into, the work that Thorne had stolen, and that I thought had vanished into thin air, had traveled across the country. It had landed on the desk of a general. It had spoken for me when I couldn't speak for myself. For the first time in months, a flicker of light appeared in my personal darkness. It was a fragile, tentative warmth, but it was there. Someone saw me. I wasn't invisible. My work mattered. But as I stared at my phone after the call ended, a cold question crept in. Was this real? Or was it just another mirage in the desert of my career, destined to disappear as soon as I reached for it? The call from Izzy was a lifeline, a single point of light in an otherwise suffocating darkness. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I had hope. It was a fragile, cautious hope, but it was there. The next morning, I received a text message from an unknown number. Captain Vaughn, LTC Thorne here. I'd like to treat you to a coffee this morning to discuss your transition. Starbucks on Figueroa at 0900, my treat. My heart hammered against my ribs. A part of me, the naive part I thought had been extinguished, wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had reconsidered. Maybe he felt a sliver of guilt. Maybe this was an olive branch. I walked into the noisy, bustling Starbucks near the USC campus with that sliver of hope still intact. It was a foolish thing to carry. He was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner, looking relaxed. He wasn't in uniform, but in a pressed polo shirt and khakis, an attempt to appear disarming. A half-empty latte sat in front of him. I ordered a black coffee, needing its bitterness to keep me sharp. Lexi, he began, his voice oozing a synthetic warmth that made my skin crawl. Thanks for coming. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know the recent decisions have been difficult, and I want you to know they weren't made lightly. I said nothing, just sipped my coffee, the heat scalding my tongue. I let him talk, let him spin his web. Honestly, he continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, I'm doing this for you, for your own good. Think about it. A post out in Barstow, it's a slower pace. No more late nights. No more weekend field exercises. More time for Jackson, predictable hours. That's what a mother really needs, isn't it? A chance to breathe. There it was again. The condescending assumption, the casual sexism, disguised as benevolent concern. He was painting my professional demotion as a personal gift. He saw me not as a decorated armor officer, but as a tired single mom who needed to be put out to pasture. A wave of nausea rolled through me, hot and acidic. I felt my knuckles tighten around my coffee cup. He must have seen the shift in my expression, because his tone changed, becoming even more persuasive, more insidious. Look, if you accept this transition gracefully, no fuss, I'll write you a glowing letter of recommendation. I'll make sure your next commander knows what an asset you've been. I'll take care of you. He smiled, a fatherly, patronizing smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. This is not an offer, my mind screamed. This is a threat. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, confidential murmur that was somehow more menacing than a shout. But if you make this difficult, Lexi, if you file an appeal, make a lot of noise, you know how these things go. A formal investigation is exhausting. It gets ugly. It puts everyone under a microscope. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he delivered the final devastating blow. It would be a terrible shame for Jackson to see his mother so stressed out. You really want to put him through that? And there it was, the hostage, my son, my beautiful, innocent 10-year-old boy, was now a pawn in his dirty little game. He wasn't just threatening my career anymore. He was threatening my peace, my home, my ability to be a good mother. He was using my greatest love as a weapon against me. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The last flicker of hope, the foolish notion that there was any decency left in this man, was extinguished forever. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't looking at my commanding officer. I was looking at a predator, a coward who would target a child to save his own skin. I remembered something General Patton once said, something I'd quoted to my cadets. Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. Thorne had just told me what he wanted. He wanted me to be silent. He wanted me to disappear. And in that moment, I decided I would surprise him with my ingenuity. I placed my cup down on the table with a quiet, deliberate click. I met his gaze, my own eyes unblinking, devoid of the fear he expected to see. All the turmoil inside me coalesced into a single point of ice-cold resolve. The game was over. The real battle was about to begin. "Thank you for your concern, Lieutenant Colonel," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the storm raging within me. "I'll consider your offer." I stood up, turned, and walked out of that Starbucks without looking back, leaving him with his lukewarm latte and his false sense of victory. The moment the glass door closed behind me, cutting off the manufactured cheer of the coffee shop, I pulled out my phone. My thumb scrolled through my contacts, past dozens of names, until it found the one I needed. I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring. "Izzy? Lexi, what's wrong?" "It's me," I said, my voice low and clear. "Set up the call with General Pierce, now." I walked out of that Starbucks and into the bright, indifferent California sunlight. The cheerful noise of the coffee shop faded behind me, but the echo of Thorne's threat, the way he'd used my son's name like a weapon, resonated in my skull. It wasn't just an insult anymore. It was a declaration of war. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove west, toward the ocean, the endless traffic, on the I-10 freeway, a blur of motion. I needed space. I needed air that wasn't tainted with his cloying false sincerity. I ended up at Palisades Park in Santa Monica, a strip of green overlooking the vast expanse of the Pacific. I walked to the railing and just stared out at the waves, watching them crash against the shore, retreat, and crash again, relentless. My father, a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant who had seen combat in Vietnam, used to tell me, "Lexi, in a fight, The most dangerous moment is the moment you hesitate. For months, I had been hesitating. I had been absorbing the blows, hoping for fairness, waiting for the system to correct itself. But the system wasn't broken. It was being manipulated. Thorne's threat wasn't a sign of his strength. It was a sign of his desperation. He was afraid of me, afraid of the truth. And that realization changed everything. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady. I scrolled past dozens of names until I found the one I needed. I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring. "Izzy, what's wrong?" Her voice was sharp with concern. "It's me," I said, my own voice low and clear, devoid of any tremble. "Set up the call with General Pierce, now." "What happened?" "Thorne just threatened my son to keep me quiet. This is no longer a personnel issue. This is about the integrity of the command." There was a pause on the other end, then, "I'm on it, stand by." 20 minutes later, my laptop was open on a park bench. The secure VTC link Izzy sent me connected instantly. The face of Brigadier General Alan Pierce appeared on my screen. He looked exactly like his official photo. Sharp, intelligent eyes, a calm demeanor that radiated authority. "Captain Vaughn," he said, his voice direct. "Major Flores tells me it's urgent." I took a breath. This was it. No emotion, no pleading, just a report. "General, I am formally requesting your intervention in a command climate issue at the USC ROTC Battalion. With the precision of a trained officer delivering a battlefield update, I laid it all out. The systematic campaign to steal credit for my work, including the renaming of the Forge, the orchestrated sabotage and public humiliation at the Ranger Challenge, and finally the meeting that morning, where Lieutenant Colonel Thorne had implicitly threatened the well-being of my son, to coerce my silence and force my transfer. I presented the facts, unadorned and undeniable. I didn't ask for help. I didn't ask for a job. I presented the facts to a superior officer because it was my duty. General Pierce listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, the silence stretched for a long moment. I could hear the distant cry of seagulls. "Captain," he finally said, his voice measured. "First, thank you for your candor and courage. Second, what you've described, unfortunately, aligns with some quiet concerns we've had about Lieutenant Colonel Thorne. His performance reports have always seemed too perfect. He comes from a legacy family, and sometimes men like that believe the rules don't apply to them." He leaned slightly closer to his camera. "Your record, Captain, speaks for itself. The data doesn't lie. That's why I wanted to speak with you. The position I have in mind at Fort Knox, leading the Future Leader Development Program, requires an officer of unimpeachable integrity. As of now, it's yours if you want it. We will handle Lieutenant Colonel Thorne." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. But it was followed by something else, something harder, a cold resolve. I thought of my book of meditations by Marcus Aurelius sitting on my nightstand. There was a line I had underlined a dozen times. "The obstacle is the way." Thorne wasn't just an obstacle in my career, he was the way to prove what kind of officer I truly was. "Thank you, General," I said. "I am honored and I accept. But with all due respect, sir, this is no longer just about me." I stood up from the bench as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. I looked out at the relentless ocean. I took a deep, salty breath, and I made a vow. Not to the general, not to the army, but to myself. I will not just walk away. I will not let him be handled quietly. I will expose what he did. I will do it for my own honor, for my son, and for every other officer who has been silenced by a man who mistakes his rank for a crown. Have you ever had that moment? That single, crystallizing moment when the fear you've been carrying finally burns away, leaving only the cold, hard steel of resolve? That instant when you decide that you are done being a victim and you are ready to fight back, no matter the cost. If you know that feeling, that powerful shift from enduring to acting, let me know in the comments with a single fire emoji. So I know I'm not the only one who decided to become the storm. Because in that moment, standing under that vast California sky, I was no longer a pawn in Thorne's game. I had just become his opponent, and I was ready to play. My vow on the cliffs of Santa Monica wasn't made in the heat of emotion. It was a calculated decision, the end result of a mental process I drilled into my cadets 100 times. The OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. I had observed Thorne's behavior. I had oriented myself to the reality of the threat, and I had decided to fight. Now it was time to act. I didn't sleep that night. Back in my apartment, after checking on a sleeping Jackson, I turned my small living room into a makeshift tactical operations center. The coffee table became my desk, my laptop the command console. The promise of a position at Fort Knox was my safety net. But my mission was no longer just about survival. It was about justice, and justice required evidence. For the next 48 hours, fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning rage, I launched my own intelligence-gathering operation. I went through 3 years of emails, performance reviews, training schedules, and logistics requests. Every document was a potential piece of the puzzle. I bought a new encrypted external hard drive. My contingency file could not exist on any government system. On it, I created a master timeline, a meticulous log of every instance of sabotage, every stolen credit, every lie. Each entry was documented with dates, times, and cross-references to corresponding emails or reports. I remembered the military principle: a plan is only as good as the intelligence it's based on. My own memory was not enough. I needed corroboration. I began to make carefully worded phone calls, not to ask for help, but to ask for facts. I called a former supply sergeant, now stationed in Texas. "Hey, Sergeant, quick question for a report I'm writing. Do you happen to remember who officially requested the name change for the FTX program back in 21? Was it me or LTC Thorne?" His answer was immediate. "It was him, ma'am. I remember because the original paperwork had your name on it, and he had us redo it." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Then I made 2 critical calls to build my alliances. The first was to Colonel Miller, a retired armor officer who had been my mentor when I was a young lieutenant. I laid out the situation clinically, without emotion. He listened, his silence on the other end of the line heavy. "Lexi," he said finally, his voice like gravel. "Thorne is a political animal, not a warrior. Men like him are a cancer. I'll make some calls. People who knew you at Fort Hood need to be aware of what's happening." I knew his word carried immense weight in the retired officer network. He was activating my rear guard. My second call was to schedule a confidential consultation with a lawyer from the JAG Corps. I needed to know the terrain of the battlefield I was about to enter. The female major I spoke to was sharp and pragmatic. She advised me on the proper channels for filing a formal complaint, and more importantly, how to phrase my allegations to be taken seriously. Focus on professional misconduct and violations of regulations, not personal feelings. She told me to document everything, which I was already doing. "In these cases, Captain," she said, the person with the better paper trail wins. The real breakthrough, the smoking gun, came late on Sunday night. I was bleary-eyed, scrolling through an old archive of administrative emails from Captain Evans. He was sloppy, arrogant, and in his arrogance, he'd made a mistake. He had accidentally included me on a reply all to an email chain he thought was private. The subject line was innocuous, weekly update, but as I scrolled down, my blood ran cold. There it was, a clear directive from Thorne to Evans, dated 6 months prior. Evans, keep a close eye on Vaughn's team. I need you to log any and all unconventional training methods. We need to build a file. The goal is to establish a pattern of recklessness. Be discreet. It was a premeditated conspiracy in black and white. They hadn't just capitalized on my perceived mistakes. They had been actively hunting for them, ready to manufacture them if necessary. But there was more. Buried deeper in the chain was an email from Thorne to a friend, another lieutenant colonel at a different post. It was informal, arrogant, and utterly damning. Dealing with my ice queen from Ohio, he wrote, "She's a great instructor, I'll give her that, but far too ambitious for her own good. A woman who wants to be one of the boys always ends up causing problems. Getting close to cleanup time. Ice queen from Ohio. Too ambitious, a woman who wants to be one of the boys." The words were a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about my work. It was about my gender. It was about my ambition. It was about him feeling threatened by a competent woman who didn't fit into his neat, traditional box. This wasn't just a professional disagreement. It was a deep-seated prejudice. This single email transformed my case from a complaint about professional misconduct into a clear-cut story of discrimination. This was the weapon I needed. It was ugly, it was infuriating, but it was powerful. I saved the entire email chain as a PDF, password-protected it, and moved it to the encrypted drive. I sat back in my chair, the first real sense of cold, hard confidence settling over me. The emotional storm had passed. Now I was a strategist with a full arsenal. I had facts, I had witnesses, I had legal guidance, and I had the undeniable proof of a conspiracy. My OODA loop was complete. I had observed the threat, oriented myself to the facts, and decided on a course of action. It was time to act. I opened a new email, the recipient line addressed to the office of Major General Henderson, Thorne's commanding officer. The subject, request for meeting, urgent matter, regarding command climate and operational integrity, Vanguard Battalion. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the final step, the declaration of war. I took a deep breath and I clicked it. The day of the video teleconference arrived. I sat in my small living room, dressed in my Class A uniform, my ribbons and medals perfectly aligned. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in my command post. My laptop was connected, the secure link established. On the screen, I could see the sterile conference room at the 8th Brigade headquarters. Major General Henderson, a stern-looking 2-star general, presided, and in a separate window from their office at USC were Lieutenant Colonel Thorne and Captain Evans, looking confident, smug even. Thorne clearly believed this meeting was a formality, the final nail in the coffin of my career. He had no idea I had brought my own hammer. "All right, let's get started," General Henderson's voice boomed through my speakers. "Thorne, give me the situation update on the Vanguard Battalion." Thorne launched into a smooth, corporate-style presentation, filled with buzzwords and veiled accusations. He spoke of challenges in personnel management and the need to restructure to optimize efficiency. He never mentioned my name, but every word was aimed at me. He painted a picture of a unit needing a firm hand to correct the course set by a subordinate who was, in his words, perhaps not aligned with the command's strategic vision. Evans sat beside him, nodding gravely like a bobblehead doll, a picture of solemn agreement. It was a masterful performance of lies, and I felt a cold calm settle over me as I listened. The bigger the lie, the harder the fall. Finally, General Henderson turned his attention to my small window on the screen. "Captain Vaughn, we have your OER flagged for relief for cause, and we have Lieutenant Colonel Thorne's recommendation. Do you have anything to add before we move forward?" This was it. The stage was set. I remembered a principle from my Special Forces training: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. My movements were deliberate. I adjusted my camera, took a sip of water, and looked directly into the lens. "Yes, I do, General," I said, my voice even and clear. With all due respect to Lieutenant Colonel Thorne's assessment of the future, I believe it's critical that any decision be based on an accurate understanding of the past. I've prepared a brief summary to ensure all parties are operating with the same set of facts. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen. A flicker of annoyance crossed Thorne's face, but General Henderson simply said, "Proceed, Captain." I shared my screen. What appeared was not a lengthy report, but a single, stark PowerPoint slide. It was clean, professional, and devastating. It was titled, "Vanguard Battalion Key Events and Discrepancies." The slide was divided into 3 columns. "General," I began, my voice that of an intelligence officer delivering a mission brief. Column 1 outlines key operational events over the last 18 months. It includes the creation of a high-intensity FTX program in August 2020, initially designated The Forge, and the battalion's Ranger Challenge selection event in March of this year. I paused, letting that sink in. Column 2 outlines the official reporting of these events as submitted by Lieutenant Colonel Thorne. As you can see, the FTX program is referred to as Thorne's Crucible, with its creation attributed to his strategic initiative. The Ranger Challenge event is documented as terminated due to a significant safety failure and lack of instructor oversight. Thorne was no longer looking smug. He was shifting in his seat, his eyes darting between my slide and the General's impassive face. "And finally, General, column 3, I said, my voice dropping slightly, "provides supporting documentation for these events." I clicked my mouse. The first hyperlink I opened was the original logistics request for The Forge, clearly showing my name as the originating officer. Click. The second was the email from Thorne's office officially changing the name. Click. The third was the training schedule for the Ranger Challenge team, detailing hundreds of hours of safety drills. The air in the virtual conference room grew thick and heavy. I could see a bead of sweat trickle down Captain Evans's temple. Thorne's face, once ruddy with confidence, was beginning to pale. "And this," I said, my voice now like ice, "is a chain of emails from earlier this year." I opened the final file, the smoking gun. It's a directive from Lieutenant Colonel Thorne to Captain Evans, ordering him to, and I quote, "log any and all unconventional training methods. The goal is to establish a pattern of recklessness." It appears the safety failure at the Ranger Challenge was not a matter of chance, but of deliberate intent. I let the image of the email hang there for a moment before delivering the final blow. "And this, General, is a follow-up email from Lieutenant Colonel Thorne to a colleague at another command. I will read it verbatim. Dealing with my Ice Queen from Ohio. She's a great instructor, I'll give her that, but far too ambitious for her own good. A woman who wants to be one of the boys, always ends up causing problems, getting close to cleanup time." End quote. Silence. A profound, absolute silence filled the digital space. The only sound was the faint hum of my laptop. I watched Thorne's face on the screen. The color had drained from it completely, leaving a pasty gray mask of pure panic. Evans looked like he was about to be physically sick. He stared at his hands, unable to look at the camera. I stopped sharing my screen, my face reappearing, calm and composed. I had laid the facts on the table. The ambush was complete. Major General Henderson stared at the screen for a long, hard moment, his gaze fixed on the window, showing Thorne and Evans. His face was like granite. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, but it carried the unmistakable authority of a man who was about to bring the hammer down. "Lieutenant Colonel Thorne, Captain Evans, you will remain on this VTC," he commanded. "Captain Vaughn, you are dismissed. We will be in touch." The screen went black. The connection was severed. The battle was over. The moment Major General Henderson dismissed me, I clicked End Meeting without a second thought. The screen went black, and the faces of my tormentors vanished. In their place was only my own reflection, pale and weary, in the dark monitor. There was no triumphant surge of adrenaline, no fist pump of victory. There was only a profound, hollow silence. The bomb had gone off, and now I was standing in the quiet epicenter of the blast. I slowly began to shut down my makeshift command center. I closed the files, ejected the encrypted hard drive, and put away the stacks of paper. Each action felt heavy, final. The intense focus that had sustained me for days was gone, and in its place was an exhaustion so deep it felt cellular. It was the fatigue of a soldier after a long and brutal campaign. I had won, but winning had taken a piece of me. I changed out of my Class A uniform, folding the jacket with meticulous care. As I walked to my car, the concrete parking garage felt cool and quiet after the emotional inferno of the meeting. I was halfway to my Jeep when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Vaughn, wait!" I stopped, but I didn't turn around immediately. I knew that voice, but it was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate panic. I slowly turned. It was Thorne. He was no longer the imposing lieutenant colonel. He was just a man, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. The predator had become the prey. "Vaughn, Lexi," he stammered, his voice cracking. "We can fix this. It was a misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication." I stared at him, my face impassive. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, just a vast, cold distance. He was like an object from a past I had already moved on from. "It's not too late," he pleaded, taking a step closer. "You can retract your statement. Tell the general it was an overreaction. We're teammates, for God's sake. We're soldiers. Think of my family, my kids." He tried to appeal to our shared identity as soldiers, as parents. It was his last pathetic gambit, trying to leverage a sense of duty and compassion that he himself had never shown. He was trying to make his problem my responsibility. That was when I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the stale garage air like a shard of glass. "Lieutenant Colonel," I said, using his rank as a wall between us. "Let me be clear, so there are no further misunderstandings." I took a step toward him, and for the first time he flinched. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. "When you used my son's name as a threat to silence me," I said, each word precise and cold, "the concept of teammates ended. When you and Captain Evans smirked at my humiliation, the concept of soldiers ended. And when you built your career on the foundation of my hard work and sacrifice, Any respect I might have had for you or your family ended. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer another excuse, another pathetic plea. But I held up a hand and he fell silent. This conversation is over, I stated, not just for today, forever. Do not contact me again. I turned my back on him then, a final definitive act. I didn't look back to see his reaction. I didn't care. As I walked to my Jeep, the sound of my own footsteps echoed in the quiet garage. It was the sound of someone walking away, not just from a man, but from a whole chapter of her life. Driving home, there was no sense of elation. The victory felt like a necessary amputation. You're relieved the disease is gone, but you're still left with the pain and the phantom limb. I let myself into my quiet apartment. The first thing I did was walk down the short hallway to Jackson's room. I stood in the doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest as he slept, his face peaceful in the soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight. This was real. This was my truth. This was why I fought. The noise of the battle was over. The long, quiet work of healing was about to begin. It's been a year. I'm no longer in Los Angeles. The relentless sun and concrete sprawl have been replaced by the rolling green hills of Kentucky. My new home is Fort Knox, and the air here, especially in the autumn, is crisp and clean. It smells like damp earth and new beginnings. My title has changed too. I am now Major Lexi Vaughn. The promotion came below the zone. A rare honor that recognized the potential that Thorne had tried so hard to extinguish. I now lead the Future Leader Development Program, the very initiative General Pierce envisioned. My office overlooks a vast training area, a sea of green that stretches to the horizon. Here, I don't have to fight for my ideas. I am expected to create them. I am not a problem to be managed. I am the standard bearer. My job is to cultivate the one thing Thorne lacked, leadership built on integrity. A few months ago, I received a short email from Izzy. FYI, it read, Official, LTC Thorne was permitted to retire early, effective immediately. Forced retirement in everything but name. Evans is being transferred to a dead-end logistics job in Alaska. Justice, slow but sure. I read the email, and to my surprise, I felt very little. No surge of victory, no triumphant satisfaction, just a quiet sense of closure, like closing a book I had already finished reading. His fate was no longer my concern. My focus was on the future. And that future is brighter than I ever thought possible. My days are still long, but they are fulfilling in a way they never were under Thorne's shadow. And when my day ends, I drive home. Home is now a small, charming house with a white picket fence, the kind of place I only ever saw in movies. As I pull into the driveway this afternoon, I see my son, Jackson, playing football on the lawn with a couple of neighborhood kids. He's taller now, his shoulders broader. He looks up as my car approaches and gives me a huge, gap-toothed grin before throwing a perfect spiral to his friend. I don't have to miss these moments anymore. The agonizing choice between being a good officer and being a present mother, a choice Thorne tried to weaponize against me, was a false one. I've learned that you can be both. The balance isn't always perfect, but it is possible. It's possible when you're in an environment that values you, not one that seeks to diminish you. Here, I can be Major Vaughn, a leader of soldiers, and I can be Mom, the lady who makes the best post-game mac and cheese. Later that evening, after dinner, as I'm helping Jackson with his history homework, my personal cell phone rings. It's an unknown number with a California area code. I hesitate, a ghost of old anxieties, before answering. Major Vaughn? The voice is young, female, and respectful. "This is she," I reply. "Ma'am, you don't know me. My name is Captain Miller, Sarah Miller. I'm one of the new instructors at the USC Vanguard Battalion." My breath catches. Miller. For a second, the name sends a chill down my spine. Before I register the different first name. "It's an honor to speak with you, ma'am," she continues, a nervous energy in her voice. I wanted to say thank you. Your story. Well, it's become something of a legend here, especially among the female officers. After the investigation and the change in command, a lot of things came to light. What you did, it gave a lot of us the courage to speak up about our own experiences. You changed the culture here. You fought a battle for people you didn't even know. So thank you. I am silent for a moment, completely taken aback. I manage to thank her for the call, and we end the conversation. I stand in my quiet kitchen, the phone still in my hand, and I smile. A real, genuine smile that reaches my eyes. And in that moment, I finally understand. The real revenge wasn't Thorne's forced retirement or Evans's transfer to the Arctic. It wasn't even my own promotion or this peaceful new life. The real victory, the true and lasting revenge, was this. It was the call from a young captain I'd never met. It was knowing that my fight hadn't just saved myself, but had created a safer, more honorable space for those who came after me. My ordeal had become a beacon. My pain had been forged into a shield for others. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. It is to build a world where your enemy can no longer thrive. My mother used to quote a line from the Bible to me whenever I faced a struggle. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." For a long time, I couldn't see the good in any of this. But now, standing here in my quiet Kentucky home, with my son safe and my honor restored, I finally do. The obstacle truly did become the way. My story found its peaceful morning in Kentucky. But I know that for many of you, your own battle might just be beginning, or you might be in the middle of it right now. We all face obstacles and people who try to define our worth for us. This journey taught me that true strength isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Now I want to create a community of strength right here. In the comments, please share one piece of wisdom or strength you discovered during your own difficult times. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience that remind us we are not alone. And consider sharing this with someone who needs to hear that their fight is worth it. Thank you for listening.